best part about working on stuff is getting to use a knife. Welcome back, everybody. So today we're going to do the first mod, my first mod to the KLX300, 2021 KLX300. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to swap out the front sprocket from the factory 14 tooth to a new JT sprockets. There is the number. Hopefully that's the correct part number. We'll find out when I get it in there. It's kind of hard to buy some parts right now because nobody is listing anything for this new 300. But from what I've heard and from what I've read, a lot of the 250 parts are working. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by taking off that front cover over the front sprocket. That black cover, it's held on by, it looks like, 2 8mm bolts. We'll pop that off, and then we're going to have to loosen the rear wheel adjusters and get that wheel pushed ahead a little bit so I can get the chain off the front sprocket. I have also got the 42 tooth rear sprocket, but to do that you've got to take the whole tire assembly off, tire and wheel from the bike. And I wanted to really just to see if the front sprocket fit first, because if it doesn't, chances are the rear sprocket's not going to work. So I don't want to open that package and go through all the hassle of having to remove the rear wheel just to find out the sprocket doesn't match. I think it does. I looked at it and it looks like that it's going to work. So all right, I'm going to start by taking off that front sprocket cover, loosening up those adjusters, pushing the wheel ahead a little bit, and then I will come back and pick up with you after that. Thanks. Stand by. Okay, the front cover's off. I just came across one little thing that I thought was worth noting. Well, two things. First, the front bolt for the cover, it's going to have red Loctite on it. I was surprised to see red, but it came off easy enough. Second is there is some guide, and I guess that's some kind of, must be, oh, it's not really a guide. I see what it is. It's a bracket. It's a support bracket for the back of the plastic cover. So anyway, the cover's off. There's the sprocket. Now I'm starting to wonder this sprocket's got 2 bolts in it, 2 threaded holes. That looks like it's, unless that's a cover, I don't think it's gonna have 2 threaded holes underneath that big nut, but we'll find out. And it's pinged. All right, so it's not really a big deal to get that washer, the backing washer, backing plate, whatever you want to call that piece behind the nut, to not be pinged down to it, peened, whatever you want to say. I just took a small nail set with a flat end and just a small body hammer and tapped it. Took all of about 30 seconds. Now I'm going to grab my sockets and get that off there. I'll come back in a minute. Okay, so that's not as bad as I thought. It looks like, if I'm correct, that the teeth in there in that new sprocket are going to match up to the teeth in here. I just won't have any use for the 2 threaded holes. Now hopefully, see how this got a raised lip on the back and offset. Hopefully there's no issue with this on the backside being flat and causing any problems. So what I'm gonna do is, I think rather than loosen up that rear wheel, I'm just gonna try to pull this sprocket off with the chain on it, because we're putting a smaller one on there, so it shouldn't be an issue. If anything, afterwards I'll have to take some of the slack out of the chain. So let me take a look at that. I'll come back. Okay, so the front sprocket's off. You do have to loosen up the rear axle and slide the wheel ahead to get enough clearance for the chain to come off the sprocket. It will come off the shaft, but it won't get all the way down and release from the end of the shaft. So anyway, back to the sprocket itself. That's the OEM 14 tooth. I believe it says it on there right there. 14 tooth in the front, and the rear is a 40. Is that the 40 sign right there? No, it's the manufacturer. It's probably on the opposite side. Trust me, that's a 40. The best part about working on stuff is getting to use a knife. Okay, so here we go. There is the 13 tooth JT sprockets, the 14 tooth. Just for an idea of comparison for you, if you've never done this job before. Let's see. Okay, I've lined up the teeth, so they line up perfectly fine. There should be no issue getting this on. But that's the difference in size between a 13 tooth and a 14 tooth. It's one fewer number of teeth, obviously, but it's also physically a little bit smaller. So, okay, I'm gonna put that back on. Since I've gone this far, I'm gonna go ahead and just yank off that rear wheel. Yank off the rear wheel, because all I gotta do now is just pull off the chain and drop it down out of the brakes. I gotta pull out the axle and drop it out the brakes, and that's it. Might as well do it while I'm in it, this deep. So I'm gonna stop the recording, I'll come back. Okay, the 13 tooth is on there. I'm not gonna lie, that was a little bit more work than I had anticipated. Well, I exactly knew what the work was gonna be. I did not anticipate how difficult it was gonna be. So the new sprocket, and even the old sprocket, they will not just go back on the teeth without some manipulation. I had to put my 27mm socket back on there and basically press it back onto the shaft. And I'm thinking that if I do ever change this, those two little threaded holes are gonna come in handy for a puller to pull that back off, because I don't think it's gonna just come right back off. Anyway, it's on there. I'm not gonna probably peen that washer back over. I'm just gonna leave it there. It ain't going anywhere. You got this cover off all the time, cleaning junk out of there anyway. So next, I'm gonna take out the axle. I should just take it for a ride and see what difference a 13 tooth made. But it still won't have the right axle ratio that I want. So I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna swap this out, put the 42 tooth on there. I gotta hurry up though, it's getting late and I gotta run up and look at a truck. So, okay, I'll take this out and get back to you. All right, so the rear wheel sets off. It's not too difficult. You just gotta take out the axle nut. There is a cotter pin on this side, which broke on mine, so I'll have to replace that. Then the axle just pulls out. Just make sure you keep track of your parts. This is the spacer for the left side of the bike. Wheel spacer for the right side. They might be the same. I did not inspect them, I don't know. Then just keep your adjusters. This is the right-hand side, and the left-hand side stayed on it. So here's your wheel. Here's the sprocket. That'd be a good time to take a look at that. JT sprockets. There is the part number. JTR 460.42 42 being the teeth. I found that was really a good setup on my Honda. The 13 in the front and the 42 in the rear. Gave me excellent power off-road and was still manageable for the street. So let's take a look here. Yep. I see 6 bolts, 6-hole pattern. This is a 6-hole pattern. So there is the 40 on there. The other thing you want to make sure of is you're getting the right chain size. This is 520. I think that's the pitch, if I'm not mistaken. 520 is what you're commonly going to find on most Japanese bikes with a chain. So, but just make sure you double check that before you go buying anything or taking anything apart. Let me grab my knife and open up this package. Look at that, the rear sprocket came with a nice sticker. I'll have to put that up here on my lift. Let's see, I think I got some stickers over here. Yes, I had my collection there. Okay, in the meantime, we'll just leave this sitting right here. Sticker for later. Now let's go back over to this. All right, so the pattern. The pattern's right, and the hub size, this portion here, is correct. So let's stick that on there, put this back together, and maybe have time to go for a ride. A little one, maybe. All right, a little tip about getting these out. If you've got yourself the proper size Allen head in a wrench, in a socket, and access to a decent sized air compressor, then it'd be a lot easier to break these bolts loose using some type of impact. If you're gonna do it by hand, which I have to, because I don't have the right size Allen socket. I've got a bunch of them, but not the right size, so I had to go rooting through my, I don't even know what size it is. It looks like, it says 5/16 on here. I imagine that there's a metric that's probably the better size, but 5/16 works. All you really gotta do is just put it in there enough to, it goes in there good. All you're doing with the Allen wrench anyway is holding the bolt head in place and getting on the back side, because on the back side is a nut and a washer. No Loctite or anything, they're just on there wicked tight. So I find the easiest way to do it is to stand the tire up, sit on the tire, and then break all the bolts loose, just moving the tire as you need to. It'd be very hard to do if you try to leave it in a position like this. You probably could, I just don't want to drag my knuckles across that gear set. So that sprocket. So that's my tip of the day on this. I'm gonna finish taking the rest out and put the new one on. Okay, the sprocket is off. That's the standard factory 42 sprocket. That's who it's made by, if anybody cares to say. SCC Tech. Side by side, the 40 and 42. You can see that the 42 again is a different size. It is a little bit bigger, not much, not a terrible bit. There's all my Allen wrenches. Fortunately, I found the first one, the right one, the first time. Anyway, so there you go. This will come over here. You'll notice that when you go to put this on, you can only put it on one way. The front has got a bevel in there. The back is flat. So the contoured side is going to go to the outside. You're going to line it up like that because your bolts have a similar contour to them. And they will just fit right down in there like that. get the ones that don't have, that are not put together. Okay, that's it. I need 2 hands for the rest. So all you're gonna do is just like with anything else that you're tightening down in a circular fashion, you're gonna go across here to here, here to here, here to here. I don't know the factory torque, but having just taken those off by hand, I've got a pretty good idea. So I will torque them down, put that back together and give you a look at it before I throw it back on the bike. Okay, it's back together. I've got to take it off the jack and set it on the floor on the kickstand in order to measure the chain slack properly. Right now, it's got considerable slack. So, pointers. There's not really anything big. If you've done this before, then it's no different than anything else. If you're gonna try this for the first time, I suggest you watch something more in-depth than mine. I'm just showing you how to do it if you've already got some knowledge on how to do it. There's nothing crazy here. That sprocket on the front, I took the threads in to about where they were in the last one. That's the best I could do. I did not peen over that washer, just mainly because I don't think it's gonna really be necessary, but also because if I don't like the 13 tooth, I think I will, but if I don't, I'm gonna go back to the 14. So the biggest problem with the 13, if you don't know this, the biggest problem with dropping a tooth in the front is right here. I don't know how well you can see this. Let me grab my light. Right down in here, actually it comes back to here. See that black piece underneath the chain? That's your chain slider that protects the swing arm. Goes all the way up there. It goes around the front of the swing arm, right there, and then comes down underneath it. What that chain slider does is protects the swing arm from the steel of the chain wearing into it, putting a groove in it. So dropping the 13 tooth down, because the circumference of it is smaller, it's gonna be a shorter diameter, the chain is gonna set on top of this slider more than it would with the 14 tooth. It's not a lot, but you'd be surprised. It's enough to cause damage. If you don't watch that, keep an eye on it. It's a replaceable part. There's a screw here. Probably there's one on the other side opposite, and I'm guessing there's one up here in the front. I've actually never changed the chain slider. Yes, I feel 2 more up here. So, but it is something to keep an eye on. A 13 tooth can cause it. I wouldn't go anything smaller than that. If you could fit a 12 tooth on here, I don't know if you can. I wouldn't do it, but it's your bike. You do what you want to do. The 13 is the smallest I would go. And if you don't want to do the 14, to get the same kind of ratio that I'm getting with 1342, you just up the back. Leave the 14 on there and up the back. You're gonna get the same thing. You're not gonna really notice much of any difference. You've got, the ratio is still the ratio. You take this number, which is 42 now, and you divide it by this number, which is 13. So 42 divided by 13 is gonna be 3.2 something, 3 maybe? So if you wanted to get the same 3.23, but leaving this 14, you would probably have to go up to say maybe a 46. Math is not my strong point, but do the math, that's all it takes. You take this number, you divide it by this number to reach a gear ratio, and then you just buy what you gotta buy to get that. If you want more power. This doesn't change the engine. The engine still outputs what the engine outputs. All this is doing is just changing where the power is in the torque band. The power band, where you're gonna feel it. You know how you hear guys say, well, my bike's got a lot of low-end grunt. This is gonna change this for me. I'm gonna get more low-end grunt. It's gonna affect the top end, but that's fine. This is not a top-end bike for me. This is a woods bike. I want more power down low. In first, second, third gear is where I want my power. That's exactly what I'm gonna get with this. So I'm gonna be very happy with it, I am sure. So let me just get this thing put back together. I'm dying to take it for a ride around the yard and see how it does. I hope you enjoyed this. I will give you an opinion on it in a follow-up video. I'm gonna start releasing videos once a week for sure, maybe twice a week, but I need to get on a dedicated schedule. This is just not, I like to have a lot of control, and this is just not within control. So I need to start doing something different. Maybe uploading on a Sunday for the first month, see how that goes. Because I work every other Sunday, but anyhow, now I'm rambling. So let me just get this bike put back together. Stay tuned for a ride and review of it. We're gonna take it up into the woods. But in the meantime, I'm gonna get it put on the ground, get that chain slack adjusted properly, tighten up the axle nuts, and that's it. Put it back together and go for a ride. Thanks for watching, I appreciate you. See ya.